Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. Hope you've all recovered from Adobe MAX. I sort of have, but still catching up on all the exciting announcements and sessions that were available. If you are tuning in live here on Behance today, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Wade and Bliss, who's here for the boops. There will absolutely be some boops. Umacorn, Cornell, Lorianne, Slimin. Great to see all of you. Hope you're excited for another masterclass. This is I don't know what number this is. This might be like 73, 72, something along those lines. Wade is still recovering. Hey, Laura. Great to see you. All right, so we have a lot planned for today. I'm going to go ahead and hop over to my screen. And if you missed the news, we obviously released a lot of updates at Adobe MAX across the entire Creative Suite, but today we're going to be focusing on Adobe XD. So, very quick rundown of what we shipped at Adobe MAX: Lottie, video, export improvements, share to Behance, and a few other little things here and there. But the big ones, obviously, are video playback and Lottie playback. And video playback in specific was basically by far the #1 most requested feature on user voice. So it's now here. Hopefully you're all adding videos to all of your projects. I know I've been going back and just, music is a bit too loud. Okay, hold on. I will lower the music. There we go. That should be lower. I got a new computer, so I'm still setting things up and getting all the settings all in order, but if that's good now, let me know in the chat. If it's still too loud, let me know as well. All right, so today we are going to be diving into video and Lottie support in Adobe XD, which is going to be really exciting. If you do want to catch up on all the goodies that is available for XD, I do have a few videos on my YouTube channel covering video and Lottie, video for landing pages, 4 ways to use Lottie in your projects. We're going to be touching a little bit on Lottie today. We're not going to go too deep into it, but in a future masterclass, we're going to be diving much deeper into Lottie. And before we dive into Adobe XD, I did release a little bit of a promo on all the things you can do, or some of the things you can do with video and Lottie. So I'm going to go ahead and run that now. Some of you may have seen it on Twitter or Instagram, but I'm going to run that now just so you can kind of see and get some inspiration. But let's go ahead and run that.
Stranger.
How about now? There we go. I pressed the wrong button. We're good. We're good now. Everyone's screaming in the chat that there's no audio. that was my fault. I apologize. But anyways, there was the promo. I've been working on that for about 5 or 6 months. Looks like my audio might be still trying to catch up, but I'm assuming I see my waves. There we go. Okay, perfect. Yep. So I'm excited that we can actually talk about these features now. It's been very difficult, especially when many of you in the chat have been asking for weeks and weeks and months, when is video coming to Adobe XD? And I had to sit there and say, oh, the team is looking into these things, all the while knowing that it's coming soon. Alrighty, so we're in Adobe XD and we're going to start a new document. I've been showing off that gaming platform quite a bit. I'm not going to be working on that today. We're going to be diving into something brand new. So we're going to start with a web page. We can do 1920, 1366, 1280. Let's just go for something nice and large, 1920 by 1080. And I think, video support is going to be huge on landing pages. Just having a video playing in the background just looks great. I did a tutorial on adding spooky videos to landing pages, and it just makes it look, I don't know, spooky, right? Are you still using that keyboard without the labels? Bliss, I have actually changed my same keyboard, but I did add keys back on the keyboard because I got fed up. It was fun for a while and it looked great on Instagram, but yeah, sometimes you got to look down and see the keys. All right. So this landing page is going to be for a travel experience. So what we're going to do, we're going to start blocking things out, and then we're going to start adding some videos. Now, in the background of this landing page, what I might want is eventually we're going to have a nice video playing back there, right? But for now, we're just going to create something like a rectangle. And just to give you an idea, is typically what I would, wrong window. Typically what I would do is I would go with the Finder or a Creative Cloud library and find an image like this one and boop, pop it into place. And we've got a nice background, right? It looks fine. But once we actually start the process of adding videos, it's going to look even better. We're going to leave that there just for now. All right. So now at the top of this landing page, we might want to start by adding some links, maybe a logo, maybe a user profile on the right. So speaking of links, let's go ahead and grab the text tool, shortcut key T. And since this is a travel experience, might want to do something like hot deals. And in terms of the typeface, we're going to let's go for a nice white. Now it's a little bit difficult to see right now. We're going to be putting a background or an overlay behind that, so we will be able to see it a little bit better. And then let's get a little bit fancy today. We're going to go for a nice serif typeface. It's probably a little bit too large. Let's drop it down to maybe 24 could work. Might still be a bit big. Let's try 22 maybe. All right. Now we might want maybe, 5 links going across this artboard, right, on the navigation bar. So what I'm going to do to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to take this current text layer, I'm going to place it into a group. So Command and Control G, and I'll call this links. And then within the properties inspector, I'm going to go ahead and enable a stack. And in this case, it converted it into a horizontal stack because there are only one layer inside. If there were multiple layers, it would detect that and set that stack up accordingly. But now I can dive in and just duplicate 4 additional times. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 links going across, right? Now they're a little bit squishy, but we will get to that in just a moment. Sam is asking, is it possible to create a gradient background blur? A gradient background blur. So you can, sort of. So I'll get to that because I'm going to be adding a background blur in a second. There are actually a few ways to go about that, trying to process which way is the best, but I will be adding a background blur in just a moment because of course we will, right? And I will touch on a gradient in a second. So they're a bit squishy, so I can either adjust the spacing inside of my properties inspector to the right, and let's go for, I don't know, we'll try something like 70. Might be a little bit too, that's not too bad actually. And I'm going to dive in here, and this might be something like packages, and we might want to go destinations and reviews. Maybe we'll just have 4 links. Maybe I'll delete this one here. And one of the nice benefits of using a stack is I can just dive in here and move these around if I need to. So maybe I'll put destinations towards the beginning. All right. And then make sure to center this. So now, like I mentioned, it's very difficult to see these links at the top, especially seeing that the background is a little bit lighter. And of course, if we did hop over and grab another image like this one here, it's even more difficult to see. So you have a few options here. You can either choose your images very carefully, right? So maybe this image here. It's a little bit better. Even though there are some stars that do clash with these text layers, that's an option. Another option is to add some sort of an overlay. And this kind of gets to what Sam is asking. And we're going to get to adding a logo and something on the right in just a moment. But I'm going to grab my rectangle, draw one out across this artboard. I'm going to make sure it's behind my links. Now, of course, we can't see the links right now because it's white on white, right? But let me just change this to a nice dark color. And maybe I'll pull this up a little bit and make sure this is centered like that, right? So that's an option. But if we wanted to get a little bit fancy, there are two things we can do here. One, we can apply a standard gradient, right? So linear gradient, and then both colors will be black, but the color on the bottom is going to be set to 0% opacity. And then you can experiment with the overall opacity a little bit, right? So if I turn this off and then back on, a lot easier to read, right? Another thing you can do is you can apply a background blur, right? So down here at the very bottom of my properties inspector, I'm going to turn a background blur on, and you have a few different options down here. You can control how much this background blur is blurring what's behind it. Now, when you're dealing with a container that is going to contain elements like text or, images and things like that, you'll probably want to keep this value very high, right? Because if it's too low, a lot of that information is still going to come through and it's still going to be very distracting. And in this particular case, because we want something a little bit darker, we can not only bring down the brightness of this particular rectangle, right? But we can also experiment with the effect opacity. And what this last one does is it's going to slowly bring back the fill color or the fill image, so whatever is inside of this rectangle. So as I'm increasing it, it's bringing back that fill color. And in this case, the fill color is black, so it's bringing back some of that black. Now, going to what Sam was asking, can we have a gradient background blur? Yes. So what we can do here is, if we wanted to, let me actually just do something a little bit crazier. Let's just add a rectangle just to show you what can be done, right? Let's add a linear gradient. We'll do some crazy colors, pink down to blue, right? Now, if we were to add a background blur here, let's set this all the way up and we'll drop this to 0. What happened? Where did that color go? And that is because when we set the background blur, it takes the fill away. And that's controlled by the effect opacity, like I was just talking about down at the bottom. So if we grab that effect opacity slider and start to bring it back, it's going to start to bring back the fill, which in this case is the gradient, right? So you can definitely get away with it this way. The other way you can do it, and I showed this off in this video right over here, designing a multicolored card, this will give you a lot more flexibility, right? So let me actually turn this off for a second. I know we're kind of getting off track, but I think it's kind of fun to explore. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to start setting some colors. So there's a purple. Let's add a pink. Something like that. And then one more color over here. Right? And, very similar to that tutorial that I just showed, if I go ahead and, grab a rectangle, I can select all these ellipses and mask them into place. And then we have two options. We can select all of these ellipses and apply an object blur, which will kind of give an interesting blur effect, right? Or we can do basically what we just did, is inside of here, we can create a shape and add a background blur. This gives you a little bit more flexibility because you can control the brightness, you can control the blur amount, the effect opacity, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of different ways you can go about this. And Sam is saying, can we make like an opacity gradient blur? Oh, I see. I don't believe you can. I think background blurs at the moment are completely solid. So you can't, I don't believe you can set, let's try it, but I don't believe you can. Let's do it at let's do this one here. So if I set this down to 0 and turn a background blur on, it kind of does it, but kind of doesn't do it. So mostly no. So hopefully that answered your question. Let's see, John is saying, video is okay, had a couple of Lottie files that didn't seem to want to play ball. So there are some Lottie files that will not import into XD, specifically those. There were a few that were made by this company called Flow. They've actually fixed that in the last few days. So if you have been creating Lottie files with Flow, we export them, bring them back in. Also, some Lottie files that contain rasterized images, some of those will not import as well, but the majority of them should import. All right, back on track. So we've gone ahead and created our navigation bar. I'm going to make sure to group these two elements, call this nav, and we're going to leave this as is for now. I don't want to spend too much time on the navigation bar because, of course, we do want to get to the good stuff, adding videos, right? Now, what I'm thinking for this, let me actually bring this whole web page in a little bit too long. All right, so what I'm thinking for this, we're going to have an area down here at the bottom that's going to contain some additional elements. I'm going to change the color just a little bit. There we go. And then up here, what I might want is, on the left-hand side, we may want some thumbnails, kind of like this, going down here. And this is kind of going to be the area where you're going to be able to control which videos are playing on this section. So it'll be a larger component with a few videos inside of it, right? And as you click on those, they'll either just cut or they'll do some sort of interesting transition. So what we can do here is let's go through and add in some images. Please use an animated logo for the landing page. We could do that. If we do have some time, we will get to that. But let me hop over to Finder and let's go ahead and find some images that we can use for these sections. So maybe I'll grab this image here, pop that in there. And then we might want, let's see. I know I have an image of a dolphin somewhere. It might be in, let me just move this over here for a second. See if I can find some of those images. Here we go. Drag that in there. And then maybe one of this giraffe. Right, so as a user is clicking on these thumbnails, which we definitely need to add a border or something around them so they don't blend too much with the background. Comic Sans hard drive. Yes, Sam, I went there. Once we click on these images, the video in the background is going to change. And we're going to start off simple, and then maybe if we have a bit of time, we will get a little bit fancy with the transitions. So we're going to have this one here. We also want some text on top of this particular background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the text tool one more time, and we're going to start by typing out the word explore. I'm going to change up the typeface just a little bit. I think the first circle should be different image. So Felipe, I'm going to actually be changing the background and adding a border around it so it doesn't blend in too much. But it'll make sense, hopefully, shortly. So we're going to have explore, and then right down below, what I'm thinking is we might have a much larger text layer that actually changes from video to video. So this one might say nature. I'm going to make that nice and large. Maybe even a little bit bigger. There. Ooh, look at how that lines up right there. That is fancy. All right, so we have explore nature here, right? And like I mentioned, I might want it to change. Now, we can absolutely just have it fade or cut, but we might want to get a bit fancy and almost have it, fade into view or move into view, kind of like a carousel, right? So are the videos downloadable assets on the prototype in developer? Yes. So the videos can be exported. Lottie, not at the moment, but that is in the works and that will hopefully be shipping in the next few versions. But videos, yes. And Cornell's asking about the limits. So Cornell says there are limits of 20 Lottie files per project. What about MP4s? Yes. So there are a few limitations at the moment with video and Lottie, and as time goes on, we will definitely, be increasing or removing some of those limitations. So essentially, 20 different videos can be inside of a project and 20 different Lottie animations as well. At the moment, 2 videos cannot play at the same time, and when you launch an artboard, a video and a Lottie cannot play at the same time either, but that will be fixed fairly soon. And then multiple Lottie animations can be playing at the same time. And also you can have a video and a Lottie animation playing at the same time as long as you initiate the other one. A little bit confusing, but hopefully as time goes on, we can make those a bit easier. All right, so we have Explore Nature, and then we might also want something like, let's see. What would be the other one? I forget the one that I had. Let me just double check. Aha. Depths. And then we might also want wilderness. That might be a little bit too long. So maybe let's do something like wildlife. There we go. Perfect. Now, obviously, we don't want all 3 of these words to be shown when the artboard loads, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to utilize an object mask. So with my rectangle shortcut key R, I'm going to drag out a rectangle, not just around the word nature, but also long enough so that the word wildlife will fit in there. So right about here. And then with this rectangle selected, I'm also going to select the text layer inside of the layers panel and then object mask with shape, which will take the layer below, or layers if you had multiple layers selected, and place it inside of that object, which in this case was the rectangle. Perfect. All right. So once we do create our next state, or our component and state, we'll be able to move this up and we'll have our next text layer in there. Now it looks like because that P kind of goes down a little bit longer, we might just want to grab that mask and bring it on down just to give a little bit of breathing room. Perfect. Okay. So we're at a pretty good point, right? Let's go ahead and just style these just a little bit. I'm going to add a bit of a border around this. Actually, this one is going to be on the inside. Just a very subtle border like that. We're going to do the same thing over here. Actually, what I can do is just select both of these, add a border all at once, bring it down to about 16 and 2. And I might also want an active indicator, right? So when one of the videos is active, we may want one of these thumbnails a little bit larger. We may want an additional border going around, something to that effect. So what we can do is we can actually set up individual components for all of these with an active and an inactive state, just to make our lives a little bit easier, right? So I'm going to grab another ellipse, draw one, oops. I can just duplicate that actually. And this is going to be the border on the outside. There we go. Maybe I'll bump this up a little bit more. And you know what? Maybe just to really separate this thumbnail from the background, I'm going to set the color at black, but add a little bit of a background blur back there. Just a little bit. Something like that, right? Perfect. I'm also going to copy this just to make my life a little bit easier. Call this, come on, there we go, border. All right, let's see, checking questions. Tala is saying, big fan of your work. I want to know how to become the best UI UX designer without getting into any confusion. That is a big question, but Laura says practice, practice, practice. Honestly, I think that's the way to go. There are a lot of designers who have never gone to school for design. They've never taken courses. They just practice a lot. They copy work which, don't be afraid to copy people's work. Obviously, don't sell it. Don't use it for commercial purposes, any of that stuff. But if you find something on Dribbble or Behance that you really like, that inspires you, copy it and keep copying it until you can really get it right. And as you do that, you're gonna continue to learn skills, right? Also, find websites and applications and designs that might have some user experience problems and create case studies. What's wrong with the user experience and the flow, and how can it be fixed? Going through those sorts of experiences and practice will certainly help quite a bit. And if you can, schooling or courses will help tremendously. But there are so many different ways to go about it. And, there are videos on YouTube and all these different places, and Adobe Live, right? Great place. All right, so I'm gonna make sure to group these. This will be nature. And then down here, this one is going to be our depths. And then we're gonna have our good old giraffe down here at the bottom. Wild life. Perfect. All right, so now obviously we don't want the active border to be displayed on all of them. So on these ones here, I'm simply going to just move them back a little bit, just like that. And now we can start the process of creating our components. Now we're not going to wire these up because the overall component that we're going to create in a moment is going to wire them up for us. So I'm going to just Command or Control K to create our component. And there as well. So we have 3 components. Now, of course, you can create a single component for all of these. Completely up to you if you want to do a main component and a few instances, or several main components. So with that done, I'm actually going to drop this down a little bit because this is going to be our inactive. And for all of these, we're going to create a new state, and this is going to be active. And I'm going to bring this up a little bit. There we go. New state. Bring it on up. And then one more. Perfect. All right, so on each of these, we have our default state and we have our active state. Now on this one, we want to keep it at active because this is going to be the video that is going to be seen. The dolphin and the giraffe have great selfies. I agree. Why don't you change the first image? I think it's not good because really confusing with the background. So Felipe, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be changing the background in just a few moments. So hopefully it'll look a little bit better, but we'll see once I do that. All right. So that's looking pretty good. We have our thumbnails looking great, and we have our default state and our active state on all of them. Now, what we could potentially do is on the inactive state is make the thumbnails a little bit smaller, possibly. Completely personal preference, but we can definitely do that. And this one a little bit larger. Alrighty. Beautiful. All right, so now the time comes that now that we have our thumbnails looking pretty good, now we can start the process of adding in some videos into this section. Now, what we'll want to do is, because we want to be able to cycle through the different videos with these thumbnails, we'll want to create a larger component, right? So I'm going to select the background, which I'm actually going to change just to a neutral color for now. I'm going to select all of my thumbnails and the text layer. So I have all of this information selected. I don't need the navigation bar at the top because that will be a completely separate element. And I want to go ahead and create a component inside of my Properties Inspector or Command or Control K, and that will pop it right over here. I'll just call that featured. All right. So now what we're going to do is we have a few different ways to cycle between the different videos, right? But we want to get our first video in there. So inside of this component, in our default state, I do have this rectangle in the background, and what I want to do is I'm going to switch over to Finder, and I do have some videos here from Adobe Stock. Now I will mention that Adobe Stock does download videos as MOVs, and XD supports MP4. So you will at the moment have to videos to MP4s. If they are under 15 megabytes, you can simply just dive in and actually change the file extension to MP4, right? And it'll work perfectly. Now, hopefully we can add in MOV support in the near future, something the team is definitely looking into. But until then, Adobe Media Coder, or there's a million applications that can do it. So let's go ahead and select, let's try this video right over here. I'm going to drag it in just like we do with images, and boop, there we go. Now, once we have that in, it creates a mask group right over here. I'm going to call this nature. And when we select the video inside of this group, we can of course move it around, we can scale it, all the same things we can do with our images. But on the right-hand side inside of the properties inspector, we can control how this video plays. So we can control, we can set it to play on tap, play automatically, or no playback at all. Now, since we want the video to play right when the artboard loads, we're going to choose play automatically. And then we can also go into this heads-up display where we have additional options. We can play back the video. We can scrub through the video. We can set a thumbnail at the top left-hand corner, right up here. We can also mute the video if it does contain audio. We can choose to loop the video, which I'm going to do. And we can also actually trim the video, which is incredibly cool. So if the video is too long, or you want it to start at a specific location, you can very easily just drag this, right? Something like that. And then press the check mark to save it. And as Wade pointed out, let me actually hop over here. If you go to stock.adobe.com, you can obviously license photos, illustrations, vectors, but we also have a free section. And right here, you can go to free videos. And I forget how many exactly, there are quite a few. If I just press return, there are almost 9,000 free videos that you can license and download from Adobe Stock, which is wonderful. So if you don't have any credits or you don't have access to additional videos, you can definitely go to Adobe Stock and grab some from there. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at this preview. I'm going to launch it right here, and there it is. Looks pretty good, right? Let's actually go ahead and try a different video. I do have a bunch that we can possibly use. That one's not bad. There was one that, this one here is kind of nice. It's very subtle, but nice. This one's not bad, but there's not enough motion to really see the magic of adding some videos. This one's nice too, but the thing that might throw it off is it's kind of washed out and there's a large white area at the top. So for things like navigation bars, may not work that well. This one's a bit shaky. So let's try, actually this one's kind of cool. Also has a white area at the top, but let's see what happens. That's not bad, actually. I think this one can work. The navigation bar at the top is throwing me off a little bit, but we can definitely revisit that at some point in the future. But that's not bad, right? That could work. All right. So we've got our first video looking pretty good. And now what we want to do is we want to be able to transition to the second video, which in this case is going to be our lovely dolphin. So right over here, I'm going to press the plus button and we're going to create a new state. And this is going to be I'll just call it dolphin. And now we can dive in and make some changes. So what I want to do is I'm going to select this thumbnail, set it back to our default state, and then this one to our active state. It looks like I forgot to bring that up a little bit, which is fine. There we go. And we also want to change the text layer, because you remember earlier I had a longer text layer with a few different words on it. So if we dive in here, we can actually just move this one up right about there. So we have our default state and we have our dolphin state. And then in the background, we obviously want to change the video. Cornell's asking, can you play videos backwards when it ends? So you cannot play backwards. There are a few things you can, obviously there's trimming. You can also use the end of playback trigger to transition to a different video or different state. So if you did have a backwards version of it, then you can automatically have it transition and then it would play backwards. but it would have to be an imported backwards video, if that makes sense. Maybe in the future. We haven't heard much feedback around playing videos backwards. There are a few additional things that the team is working on, but haven't heard anything about backwards videos, but maybe in the future. So now I want to make sure to replace this video. So let's go ahead and find the video of dolphins. I have a few here. That one's not bad. Well, this is a shorter version of the longer version. All right, so I'm going to grab this one, pop it. Oops, I missed it. What? There we go. Perfect. And again, I want to make sure that this video plays back automatically. And we don't need any trimming, so that should be fine. We do want to loop the video. Perfect. And then we're going to do one more new state, and this is going to be the giraffe. Default state, active. I'm going to grab this text layer like we did earlier, move this up so it says wildlife right about there. And then I believe I do have a video of a giraffe somewhere. Might be in animals. There they are. And boop. Perfect. Alrighty. So we've gone through and created all of our states. We have our default state, which is explore nature. Then we have the dolphins and we have our giraffes. Yeah, and again, the navigation bar at the top, I am not loving it. So we may revisit that at some point. Maybe I'll just hide it so we don't have to worry about it. So what we want to do now is we want to make sure that we wire up this component so that we can very easily toggle between these different states. So to do that, I'm going to hop into prototype mode right here at the top. And I want to start by selecting the object that's going to trigger the transition. So I'm going to select the dolphin. I'm going to click on... Now I'm actually going to run into a problem, right? We'll get to that in a second. Now, if I click on this handle and I try to choose a state, I only have the states of that particular component, right? You remember, these are individual components and it's nested inside of a larger component. And at the moment, one component cannot trigger another component. So what we'll have to do in this case is we'll just want to make sure that inside the layers panel, we just place these components into groups. Group and group. This will be called wildlife, depths, and nature. And now that I've done that, I can select the group, click on the handle, and then choose the dolphin state over here. Now in this specific case, there really isn't anything to, well, there is something to animate. I lied. There is the text right over here. So if I switch this over to auto animate, we can do maybe ease in out, maybe duration of 0.4 seconds. We'll see what that looks like. And we'll click. Not too bad, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we can definitely get a bit fancy with how the videos come into play, and we may explore that a little bit later or possibly in a future masterclass, but I'm going to make sure to wire all of these up. This is going to be the giraffe. We'll keep the same properties the same. And now we can go to the additional states and wire these up very quickly. Giraffe, and then the giraffe state, we'll wire it up to the dolphins, and then our nature state. There we go. So we've gone through and wired up all of these components, right? So if I go ahead and press play, I can now click and go to all of the different states, and they're looking pretty good. Now there is a little bit of a scaling thing going on. I'm not 100% sure what that is. I will ask the team why some videos scale very slightly. I think it's probably because, if I'm guessing correctly, it's probably because I dragged one video on top of another inside of the additional states to replace it. And some of the videos are actually different size. Some of them are 1920 by 1080. Some of them are like 2048 by 1080. So I think it might be throwing it off a little bit. That's probably what's causing it, but I will ask the team and see what what's going on there. Let me make a few quick changes to this navigation bar because it is bothering me a little bit. I think it's a little bit too big, so I'm going to just bring this on up a little bit. All right. Let's see. Cool. Where's the... Oh, I haven't done any boops yet. I will definitely get to a boop. All right. So that's looking pretty good. And, you know, one thing you can also do, and I did show this off in the... I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to grab this image. Is you can add in like an overlay on top of your landing pages. So I just cut out this guy from in Photoshop. Pop him over here. Maybe I'll move this text over a touch. Now we may run into a little bit of a problem here, especially on the additional, like the draft state, kind of losing a little bit of that text. Maybe I'll just move him over just a touch. Just gives a little bit of depth to your project, right? Alrighty. Can you show how to share XD projects on Behance? I may do that probably next masterclass, but basically under share mode, if you do go ahead and create a link right here, let's actually just go ahead and type out travel, just like that. I'm going to create a link, and it does have to be a public link if you do want to share it to Behance. So right now it's taking all this information, uploading it to the cloud. So, you know, because there are videos, it may take a minute or two. But it's moving along. It'll get there, I promise. There we go. So once you've gone through this process and you have shared this link, right over here, there is a new Behance button. And when you press that, I'm not going to do that now because it's going to open up the browser and it's going to all explode on me. But once you press that, it's going to open up in Behance, and it's going to actually take the embed code and pop it in there for you. So you can immediately share it, or you can continue adding to your project if you want before you actually publish it. All right, so we've gone ahead and created all this. Now I do have some additional elements on this other document. I'm just going to pull on in just to, you know, kind of wrap this up a touch. But since we do have a few additional minutes, we have about 20 minutes, I did mention earlier that you can get a little bit creative with how the transitions actually take place from video to video. And I think this could be kind of fun because you can definitely, you know, place videos inside of specific masks. You can do all sorts of interesting things. So let's duplicate this over. And I'm going to ungroup this component so we can start from scratch. Let me hide this guy for a moment. And what I'm thinking is, you know, we have our nature video here, right? But what I'd kind of like to do is actually have the videos masked inside of a circle. And then as each of them are tapped on, that circle expands to give a little bit of an animation. So what we're going to do is, let me delete this video. And we're going to start with let's start with the dolphin one, right? So what I want is, I'm going to create a very large circle, because essentially, I had to switch over to the Apple Magic Mouse because my other mouse was not working very well for some reason, and it's just bouncing all over the place. So we want the circle large enough that the video actually fits inside of the circle, right? So we've created this nice large circle, and then we're going to hop over to Finder, and I do have that dolphin video one more time. I'm going to drag that in. Perfect. Make this a bit smaller. Oops. Just like that. Great. Now, since we don't want this video to be seen initially, right? Let me actually name this Dolphin. What I want to do is I actually want to take this circular mask that we created and shrink it down to the size of that thumbnail right over here, right? So I'm going to grab that ellipse and shrink it on down. Oops. This mouse is all over the place. You can probably see the little movements that the mouse is doing. There we go. And then we may also want to either shrink down the video or kind of move it to the side a little bit just to give a little bit of motion. So I can just move it over to the side. I do want to make sure that this is not playing. So I'm going to go to no playback and we're going to switch that to play automatically in the next state. And we also want to make sure that this is behind the depths thumbnail, right? Perfect. Yeah. And then we can do the same thing for all of these as well. So I'm going to grab the ellipse one more time. And you don't have to go this crazy with these videos. You can, just have them kind of slide up. You can move them over. All sorts of different things you can do. But let's find, which video did I use? This one here. I drag this in. Let's make sure that fits in that area that we're going to be using. Perfect. Now this one will be the active one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to name this nature and then shift this on back here. I'm actually going to make sure this is on top. Oops. Perfect. And all my thumbnails should be on top. Very good. And then we're going to do one more. Actually, this one, what I might be able to do to make things a little bit easier is just grab this dolphin one, copy it or duplicate it. Wildlife, let me move this to the top for a second. And I'm just going to grab the giraffe video. And I should be able to replace this. Very good. There we go. There's the giraffe. All right, move that to the back. Perfect. Okay, so we've gone ahead and masked all of our videos inside of ellipses. And this is definitely going to give us an interesting result, but we're going to see how things look. Sometimes it might work. It's all about experimentation. So like we did earlier, what we want to do is select all the information and create a component. And we already have our default state set up. So we're going to create another state, and this is going to be depth. So all of this is very similar to what we did a little bit earlier. Sam is asking, how's the new MacBook? So it's pretty impressive. I'm actually streaming and running all of this on the new MacBook Pro right now. I did experience a few frame drops when I was trying to stream at 60 frames a second, which is why I had to drop it to 30 for this stream. I'll figure out why that was happening. Might be because I don't have the settings, everything set up properly. But yeah, it's a beast. It's a great computer. All right, so I have the new state set up, and now what we want to do is we want to create that transition. So I'm going to dive in here. I'm going to select that dolphin layer with the masked video. I'm going to select the ellipse and make it much larger. Oops. Like that, right? We want to make sure that the entire canvas is taken over. And then I can select the video and actually just shift it on over into place. Now, obviously, we have a video on top of this. So there are a few different ways we can handle this. We can either start the nature video at the bottom of the stack, or we can then do the opposite and select that ellipse and shrink this one down so that it'll kind of cross over with each other. Now the downside of that, and you might see this in a moment, is that as the transition is taking place, we may see a little bit of white space in the background. But let's find out. Let's see what happens. So let's go to our default state, and like we did before, prototype mode, we're going to select our dolphin. We are going to click and select the depths group state. We want to make sure that auto animate is selected, and we'll keep ease in out in 0.4 seconds. We'll see what that looks like. And here we go. Oops. It helps if I actually choose to play the video automatically. That would help. And I'm sure I'll have to go to the depths one and play this automatically as well. All right, let's try this one more time. Not bad, right? You definitely saw a little bit of that white space in that corner. So what you can possibly do is actually just Let me actually undo this before we shrunk down nature. So what I think I might do is actually move the nature right below to the bottom. That way I don't have to worry about shrinking that one down. Everything should just kind of go on top of that nature one, that first one, right? Wire that up. And I want to make sure that all the videos are playing. There we go. And let's take a look. It shrunk down. Oh, yeah, I shrunk that down, didn't I? That's not what I wanted to do. No, I didn't. Oh, yes, I did. I forgot to undo. All right, we're good. We're good. That's a little bit better, right? So keeping that nature video at the back, just the regular size, or you can put an image back there if you want to. We'll just avoid having a little bit of white space during that transition. So now we can go through and I did realize I should probably also switch this over to our default state and this one over to our active state. And then we'll do one more. Let's actually do it from here. New state, wildlife, active, inactive, and then we'll want to dive into the wildlife group. Grab the mask and view, make it much larger. Just like that. And then, of course, the video will be moved into place. Just to give a little bit of motion. You don't necessarily have to move the video, but just to give a bit of motion could be kind of fun, right? And I'll want to make sure that this one is playing automatically. All right, so one more time, let's make sure that everything is now wired up so we can go through these in no particular order. This will be going to wildlife. And then from here, we'll want to go back to our default state and then our draft state. And then finally, from that draft state to our default and then our depths. There we go. So if all went well, we should be able to launch it. We can see our video. And now we should be able to click on these various thumbnails. And you're noticing when we're on either the depth or the dolphin or the draft, we're also seeing a little bit of a transition back to the first or back to the previous one, which is kind of a fun effect, right? One thing I would probably do is mask this entire area because we can see a little bit of a transition down at the bottom. So I'd probably just mask that just to avoid that kind of awkward looking area. Mask with shape, and this I'll just call this header. That way anything that is actually outside of this rectangle will not be seen. So we're not going to see any of that weird awkward transition. That looks a little bit better, right? It's still a little bit interesting. You know, what I would probably do if I had a little bit more time is from the second state going to the third, I would probably keep dolphin in place and make sure that the wildlife is on top of it. That way there's just, you don't have the shrinking and the growing, right? So, you know, definitely things to think about. But for the most part, oh, you know what I didn't do? I'll do this very quickly, just so we have a nice final result. I'm going to move this up. And then I'm going to move this one up as well. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Not perfect, but not bad. All right. So that is probably going to wrap things up. We didn't get to Lottie today. Definitely next week, we're going to explore, you know, all the cool things you can do with Lottie, including the end of playback trigger. But a big thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed video and Lottie and all the fun updates that came at Adobe MAX, not just in XD, but across all of our applications. Big thank you to everyone who has tuned in, Umacorn and Bliss and Laura, Masayu, Cornell, Wade, Tim. Stick around. We've got Kyle T. Webster coming up in just a few minutes, and I will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.